Hey everybody, it's Charles, your hobby hero, kicking off the last week before the Set 2 Rise of the Floodborn Lorcana set drops with our top 10 most impactful cards coming from Set 2. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button down in the bottom corner. I do appreciate it. I do put out regular content about the hobbies that I love the most, with this channel being dedicated to the card games that I play. Now, waking up this morning, we had a big surprise with the full 204 card set spoiled on the official Lorcana app. So now that we have the full set list of cards, I went through, kind of picked out my top 10 cards that I think are going to be having an impact on the Set 2 meta. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on in. At number 10, we have Winnie the Pooh having a think. Now, he is a 3-drop for Sapphire. He's inkable. He is a 2 strength, 3 willpower, 2 lore generator with the ability Honey Pot. Whenever this character quests, you may put a card from your hand into your inkwell face down. Now, we've seen this effect before on the Fishbone Quill from Set 1, which a lot of the ramp decks found homes for in that particular deck, as it allowed you to ink a second card a turn, as well as ink those uninkable cards out of your hand. Now, this one having a body has its pros and cons. While it can't activate the turn that it comes into play, it can activate by questing, generating 2 lore, and progressing your win condition when you play it. All that to say, I think ramp looks a little bit more viable this coming set, and I think this card is going to be a centerpiece in those particular builds to kind of push them past the hump that they had in Set 1, where you just kind of felt like you were doing a whole lot of setup for an in-game while not really advancing your win condition to get there. This guy does generate 2 lore a turn, which can become a win condition in and of itself while you're ramping up to your bigger stuff late game, and I think he will be a centerpiece in that deck going forward. Number 2 on the list, Cinderella Stouthearted. Now, she was revealed early on as a 7-drop for steel. She is inkable with 5 strength, 5 willpower, 3 lore generator. She has a shift cost of 5, and we do have 2 new Cinderella targets at the 1-drop spot and the 2-drop spot to take advantage of that shift cost, and they're both playable cards, so it should be pretty feasible to get her down on turn 5. She has the ability Resist 2, which is the highest resist cost we do see on characters from this set, which is an incredible ability that reduces all damage that she takes by 2. And the ability, it's the Singing Sword, which allows her to challenge readied characters whenever you play a song. Now, she's an absolute house coming down on turn 5 with Dragonfire and the World's Greatest Criminal Mind, really the only direct answers to her once she's in play, especially with that Resist 2 and a lot of the removal that we're getting from Set 2 being damage space. She becomes a very, very tough card to get rid of. The fact that she generates 3 lore is very, very aggressive and can deal with problematic ward creatures or problematic readied creatures that your opponent may be trying to protect by swinging in on them. I think she's got a lot of potential, and I think steel is already set up to just get better from its impact on Set 1. So I expect that this card could be a powerhouse in Set 2 that has a lot of people dreading a turn 5 drop. Number 8 on my list is Alice Growing Girl. Now, this is our first legendary entry onto the list. She is a 3-drop for Sapphire, inkable, 1 strength, 4 willpower, and 1 lore generator with 2 abilities. The first is Good Advice. Your other characters gain support. The second ability is What Did I Do? While this character has 10 strength or more, she gets +4 lore generation. So she's a similar effect to the Belle that we had Set 1, in that if you really accomplish something above the normal as far as giving more lore in Set 1 with Belle, and this one more strength in Set 2 with her, you get that additional lore generation. And I do think that that may be a little difficult to pull off, but her first ability actually is really good in and of itself, especially dropping in on turn 3. She combines really well with a lot of different decks that are already going to be out there. So fitting Sapphire in with like Emerald and using her ability to buff the new Pete card or dropping her in with Amber with the new Queen card to really ramp her strength up that much faster is just a really effective card. Whenever you have all of your characters have support and you don't have to sacrifice any of the stats to actually have the support on the card itself, you can really generate a lot of extra value here and there in favorable exchanges. Or again, if you have enough of a board presence, getting her up to a 5 lore generator on turn 3 is exceptional as well, and really closes that window to 20 very quickly if she ever gets to generate 5 lore, even for 1 turn. All right, number 7 on the list is our first song, and that is Bippity Boppity Boo. This is a 3-drop uninkable action. It is a song where you return chosen character of yours to your hand to play another character with the same cost or less for free. Now, I haven't done a whole lot of playtesting with this particular card, just because, like I said, today we finally got the full list of 204 cards that are going to be out. But this card in and of itself, mechanically speaking, especially in a set with a lot of shift characters, has a ton of potential to be abused, and abused dramatically. So for this character in particular, I think the biggest opportunity to abuse her is going to be with the shift mechanic. Having something like the Queen come down on turn 2 and being able to sing this card and effectively cheat into play any other 5-drop in the game while bouncing 2 inkable cards back to your hand is extraordinarily good. Combine that with effects like the giant Tinkerbell that comes into play, triggers, would be able to sing this, return to her hand, come back into play by herself, trigger again, and then net that inkable card into your hand. It's just a very, very solid way to abuse this card. If the format ends up being slower, being able to combine this card with cards like the 8-drop Elsa or the 9-drop Maleficent and their abilities when they come into play just is insane value for a 3-drop song. So I do expect to see this card around the format in some shape or size, and depending on what its target may be, possibly one of the most offensive cards in set 2. All right, number 6 on this list is Christopher Robin the Adventurer. Now, he is a 6-drop inkable amber character for 2 strength, 6 willpower, and 2 lore generation, with the ability will always be together. Whenever you ready this character, if you have 2 or more other characters in play, gain 2 lore. Now, if it didn't have the stipulation of having the other 2 characters in play, I think this guy could be the number 1 card on my list, because once this guy hits play, he is very easily a huge lore machine in progress. Now, thank God they didn't give this character shift to where you could surprise your opponent with him coming into play, but if he sticks around for a full turn in play with 6 willpower, not too hard to do. You have cards like LeFou and Shield of Virtue, which are already kind of mainstays. We have the new song that could be sung by him to untap him as well. Just generating a ton of extra lore in 1 turn. And oh, by the way, when he readies at the beginning of the next turn, if your opponent isn't able to take care of him in that 1 turn, that's going to generate another 2 lore. Just an absolute ton of lore possibility when this guy untaps. Anywhere from 6 to 8 on the first turn that he's dry is really not out of the question, and because of that, this guy could end up being an absolute monster for the constructed set 2 meta. All right, number 5 on the list, and a personal favorite of mine, is Prince John, greediest of all. Now, he is a 3-drop for Emerald. He is uninkable with 1 strength, 2 willpower, 2 lore generation, and ward. With the ability I Sentence You, whenever your opponent discards 1 or more cards, you may draw a card for each card discarded. Now, while this guy doesn't seem as impressive by himself as some of these other cards may, the deck that's surrounding him has a ton of synergy in and of itself, with this guy really being the centerpiece that ties it all together. His draw engine on his particular card is absolutely insane. A lot of the discard cards that we have right now are already slightly card advantageous, or at least a neutral card advantage. He tips the scale very heavily in our favor if he is in play in that particular deck. The fact that they also gave this guy ward means that you can really just leave him out there and continue to generate value with him throughout the game. And if you're able to take control of the game, he quests for 2 lore as well, which is significant. And the fact that he can actually help close out those games if you're able to keep their board disrupted enough with your other cards in your game. I really think that this guy, at least at the initial launch of this, is probably going to be everywhere just because there's so much synergy with this card right out of the gates. I definitely think you're going to need a way to be able to address his discard ability or be able to remove him from play with cards that allow you to do either large amounts of damage to the whole board or to attack readied characters. All right, number 4 on the list is Shercon, the Menacing Predator. He is a 3-drop for Ruby with 3 strength and 3 willpower and 1 lore generation with the ability Don't Insult My Intelligence. Whenever one of your characters challenges another character, gain 1 lore. Now, one of the problems I had in set 1 with Ruby was they really didn't have any way to take advantage of all the good stats they had on characters early in the game. Their lore generation was actually pretty poor, despite having some really good removal cards up at the top end. Now this card comes in and changes all of that, taking those really good stat characters that they had and adding a lore generation ability to them every time they challenge. Now drawbacks from cards like Shield of Virtue or LeFou that kept your character from questing the second time during the turn are not as big of a drawback because they can challenge in that second phase of being readied and generate additional lore. This combined with a couple of other cards in the set like the new Queen that allows you to draw cards when you're challenging, I think is going to open up a whole new archetype that we haven't seen so far out of Ruby. I personally am very excited about it, and this is a card that I look forward to building with very early on in set 2. All right, number 3 on the list is Merlin the Goat. Now we saw a lot of different versions of Mim and Merlin. In my opinion, this is probably the best of the Merlin group. He is a 4-drop for Amethyst. He is inkable. He has 4 strength, 3 willpower, and 1 lore generation. But what really makes this guy special is the ability Here I Come. When you play this character and when he leaves play, you gain 1 lore. So if you're not already familiar with kind of what Amethyst was themed around in set 2, there are a lot of bounce effects, return effects, things coming and going in and out of play, and each and every time this guy does that, he is going to gain a lore, one lore when he comes in and gain 1 lore when he leaves. If he stays in play for a turn as well, he's going to get to quest and get a 3rd lore in that equation as well, which just makes this card very powerful. Similar to like Cusco in set 1, where when you played Cusco, he was almost a guaranteed 3 lore every time you played him. This guy is going to be a guaranteed 2 lore every single time you play him. That makes him very, very attractive for a lot of different decks that Amethyst could want to go. A recursion deck, a fast aggro deck with a lot of bounce, return, triggers, even a control deck that's not looking to do a whole lot early game. Just playing this guy and returning him to hand, or playing this guy and challenging for the little bit of lore early on could make a huge difference. In set 1, one of the biggest weaknesses Ruby Amethyst had was it really had no progression in its deck at all to win the game early on. This guy changes that entirely. He allows you to put him into play very early on for no risk at all and generate some additional lore. If he's challenged, if he's removed, or if you need to use him to challenge, you're going to get value out of him. If not, later in the game, you're going to be able to return him to your hand for a little bit of value and then put him in the inkwell if you need to. But that really unstoppable lore generation is going to make him, I think, one of the centerpiece cards around set 2 meta. All right, number 2 on the list is a 2-way tie between Madam Mim, rival of Merlin, and the Fairy Godmother Mystic Armorer. Now, Madam Mim is a 5-cost inkable for Amethyst with 2 strength, 5 willpower, and 2 lore generation. She has the ability Shift 3 and the ability Gruesome and Grim. When you exert this character, play a character with cost 4 or less for free. They gain Rush, and at the end of the turn, you banish them. And then Fairy Godmother is also a 5-drop inkable for Amethyst with 3 strength, 4 willpower, and 2 lore generation. She also has Shift. Hers is for 2, with the ability Forget the Coach, Here's a Sword. Whenever this character quests, your characters gain Challenger +3 and when this character is banished in a challenge, return this card to your hand this turn. Now, while I have them on here as a tie, that doesn't necessarily mean I think that they're the same power level, but I do think they fill a very similar role. Now, could they both end up being in the same deck going forward? They could, but I do think one or the other is kind of going to emerge as kind of what Amethyst is wanting to do with all the bounce and return mechanics that they're using. Now, Madam Mim has the ability to play a character for free, effectively giving a 4-drop or less the ability to be sung by her and putting them into play with Rush to challenge. If they're alive at the end of the turn, they do get banished, but as we've just discussed, Amethyst has got a lot of ways to bounce that character back into hand, getting some extra value. So for example, she could put Merlin into play, gain the 1 lore off of him for him entering into play. He could challenge something, survive that challenge. You still have all your ink available because you used him to play it. So playing another version of one of the Madam Mims that bounces a character to your hand, bouncing that Merlin to your hand, generating another lore, and he stays to be used again the following turn with her. Similarly, the Fairy Godmother works sort of like a smaller version of Dr. Facilier. With her ability, she gives all your characters Challenger +3, which is a significant challenging bonus, and then for the rest of the turn, anything that's challenging is going to get returned to your hand so that you can replay it. So she comes into play, she is able to quest, giving all your characters that ability to challenge. If any of them die, it's going to trigger all of their effects to come back to their hand and really be able to let you rinse and repeat the following turn. Now, out of the two, I do lean a little bit more towards Madam Mim, as she just feels a little bit more unfair. Her ability to cheat something into play and still be able to play something behind it because you've not used your ink just feels like it's going to be more disruptive to a constructed format than the ability to have them bounce back in. That may just be because I'm more familiar with Dr. Facilier set 1. Not to say that his ability when he was in play was not amazing, but just being more comfortable with it may make the Madam Mim feel like a stronger card to me. But if I had to bet between one or the other one on which becomes a bigger centerpiece between the two, I would definitely lean towards Madam Mim, but it's so close, I had them both on the list at number 2. So that brings us to our number 1 card on the list, but before I show you what my number 1 pick is, make sure you go to the comment section below and leave me your picks for the cards you're most excited to play or you think will have the biggest impact on the set 2 meta, because I'm excited to see what you guys are excited to play with the release of the full 204 card list. Now, without further ado, my pick for the number 1 card that I think is going to cause the most issues and what I feel may be the most unfair card for set 1 is going to be the Queen Commanding Presence. She is a 5-drop inkable for Amber with a 4 strength and 3 willpower and generates 2 lore. She has a shift cost of only 2 with the ability Who is the Fairest. Whenever this character quests, chosen opposing character gets -4 strength this turn, and chosen character gets +4 strength this turn. Now, when I first saw this card spoiled, I really liked this card, but I didn't think there was any chance we were going to get a 1-drop queen to shift up from. I figured we may get a smaller queen, or maybe we don't get smaller queens and they just use that low shift ability to trigger her very good questing ability. But then they spoiled the 1-drop queen, who is inkable and is perfectly fine as a 2/2/1 lore generator, and this card all of a sudden becomes nuts. For one, just stats alone allow this card to be absolutely crazy on turn 2. A 2 lore generator on turn 2 are some of the best cards that we have in the game right now. None of them have anywhere close to the stats of a 4 strength, 3 body. Now, if you combine that with the fact that she can sing literally every song in the game with the exception of Be Prepared on turn 2, and you have now opened up a ton of possibilities for what can happen to you or what can be done to you very early on in this game. Her second ability is not bad either and actually synergizes with a number of cards in the new set. Pete especially, this is a card that a lot of people have been talking about. She single-handedly activates his ability to quest for 4 lore. Also with Alice, she comes in and quest. She now has support because of Alice's ability. She can give Alice +8 strength by herself, leaving Alice only 1 more strength needed to activate and quest for 5 lore. Leaving those cards out of the equation, -4 strength and +4 strength is just a huge swing advantage if you're trying to create a favorable advantage. That effectively takes a Tinkerbell down to 0 strength while taking just about any character in the game that can trade into her favorably. It's for those reasons, and then the fact that she is completely inkable, which means she is risk-free for any deck playing Amber. I think this card is going to see an absolute ton of play. She fits right in with the Steel Song list, as she allows you to get the cheapest, quickest possible 5 singing character into play. She beats Ariel into play. She beats Stitch into play without the help or need to include the lantern at all in the deck list. She just has no downside at all and a ton of upside. And for those reasons, she gets my #1 spot on my list of the top 10 most impactful cards from set 2 for the next meta. Again, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And until next time, guys, Hobby Hero out.